Welcome to the Sonic Collective, a music podcast that explores a different album or musical concept each month, diving deep into its history, context, and impact on the music industry. Join our hosts, Alan, Scott, and Darren Scott, that's way too many Scotts, as they share their thoughts, insights, and personal connections to the music, inviting you, the listener, to discover new perspectives and appreciation for some of the greatest albums and music of all time.
Hi, everyone out there in Sonic Collective land. I'm Scott G. And as usual, I'm joined by the crew, Alan, Darren, and Scott C. It was my pick this month, and I went with 1991's Slave to the Grind by Skid Row. I know Darren will likely delve into the deeper history, but some of the things that factored into my picking it was that the album was the very first heavy metal album to chart at number one in the new Nielsen era, which also started in 1991. So take what you will from that. But it's also a departure from the more 80s sounding glam rock that the first album was, and the band settling into their heavier sound. Also, I never really listened to a lot of glam and hair metal outside of what was on the radio because that was really my older sister's music, and I couldn't listen to the same music as her. It wouldn't work. So the fact, though, that she's still going to all these concerts of these guys that are still touring around and enjoying glam hair metal all these decades later, it got me curious. I didn't want to do Poison. I didn't want to do Bon Jovi. I didn't want to do Warrant. Those were the other names that immediately came to mind. So here we are, dipping our toes in the pond at the crossroads of 80s hair and 90s grunge. As usual, I'm going to give everyone else a chance to share their own thoughts before digging in, and let's throw over to Darren. What did you think?
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, Skid Row. I remember the band quite well. I was a big fan of hair metal. I was born in 1969, so the 80s were kind of my jam. I know hair metal gets a lot of criticism. I even had a funny story where at one point my mom had the talk about sexuality and being gay and how it was okay, which is actually very cool and progressive for my mom in, let's call it 1980-81, because I had posters of like Motley Crue and Rat and all these bands on my wall that obviously they all looked like beautiful women and or androgynous at best. But that was the scene at the time. But, anyway, for this album, we're fast forwarding ahead a few years because really this album came in 1991. And I'm going to get back to that because hair metal really had its kind of real rise in the early mid 80s and then was waning heavily by this time. But anyway, Skid Row, fronted by Sebastian Bach, but Dave Sabo, Rachel Bolan were kind of the two key members of the band that formed it and the main writers, but you had Scotty Hill and Rob Affuso. That was the original lineup. It didn't last long. I believe they split up after this album, or was there one more? I should know that. Anyway, yeah, that didn't work out for them, but we can get into that later. Neither here nor there. But so this was a follow-up of their first album that was huge. Youth Gone Wild, I Will Remember You, like big 80s arena rock hair metal songs. Very huge at the time, and it just catapulted them into stardom. So, this was the follow-up album. What I got to say, maybe because it was 1991, I'd already moved by that time from Prince Edward Island to Alberta. I was in a bit of transition. My hair metal days were kind of waning, which might be a problem for this album. But, it was just, I didn't listen to it at the time. I had no idea what this album was, to be honest. Some of the songs kind of, sort of sounded familiar. I have seen, not Skid Row, but Sebastian Bach live a number of years ago. And he was awesome, by the way. That guy can sing. And I don't think anybody's going to deny that. Now, whether you like the style or the music can be different, but the singing part, he was raised by a family that was very artistic and open. His father was an artist, a paint artist, and actually painted the album cover, which folds out. It's a full painting. Very cool. His mom could sing. So he was really raised in that environment and wanted to sing from a very young age. So that's very cool. Um, this album came out in 1991, as mentioned, and it actually received pretty good reviews, and the fans gobbled it up. They had five singles off of it. I think it was Monkey Business, Slave to the Grind, the title track, which actually apparently they left the demo on because they tried to improve on it, but they realized the demo was the best take. And that first song you hear, that title track, is actually the first time they recorded. So that's pretty cool. Wasted Time, Darkened Room, and Quicksand Jesus are the other three. So this was known to be a lot heavier, and you do get that. It's definitely very different from their first album, although you can see it came from that first album, and obviously it's the same band. I actually thought when I listened to it, I'm like, this has to be different writers or something changed, or there was a band change I wasn't aware of because I felt it was such a departure from the first album. But when I went back, I realized it wasn't. It was still written by the same guys. I guess they were just experimenting, pushing themselves. I think if anything, you mentioned the term glam rock, which I think is just another way to say hair metal in a way. I kind of thought this also sounded very like prog rock, progressive. Rush is one, but Marillion, or there's lots of Yes bands like that were very progressive and kind of meandering rock. I felt I got a little more influence of that as well. When I listened to the album, it just seemed proggy. And I will state that outside of a few bands, I'm not the biggest prog rock fan. They really went for the sound. They really pushed Bach's voice. And again, he can sing. It is said that this is his best recorded material for his voice and how he sang it. And I don't deny that. Again, the guy can sing. Very cool too that they got their start by knowing Bon Jovi. Apparently, the two writers I just mentioned, Sabo and Rachel, that are Dave Sabo and Rachel Bolan, were good friends with Bon Jovi. So that they got their start, and they kind of agreed to help each other when they started out. So they actually got the same manager, Doc McGee, which I mean, there's a whole movies and documentaries on that guy. Shady. He was the manager of Motley Crue, Bon Jovi, but was potentially shady as hell. But also kickstarted Skid Row. So they get their start. They released the first album, it's a banger, and then release this one. Now, it is quite a departure. And their fans seem to like it and think it's heavier. But, one of the questions I had that I thought was interesting was it's like, well, if they're really departing, they like the heavier thing. But three of the singles, being the Darkened Room, Quicksand Jesus, and Wasted Time, are total poppy power ballads. And I mean, it features his voice really well, but you're like, yeah, this is way heavier. This is the best. But like the three favorite songs are going back to kind of the roots of the first album, and that power ballad, really leveraging Sebastian Bach's voice. Yeah, I mean, so if we go back, and I mentioned it, to the context of the time, 1991, and I did a little printout here. So the best way I think to put this is that I think Skid Row kind of doubled down on their sound. If anything, went back to some roots. I know that Sebastian Bach really liked Queensryche, Dokken, who actually I liked at that time too, but even though they're a little more proggy hair metal, but they almost leaned into that a little more. Whereas, okay, 1991 should ring a bell with people. A little album called Nevermind came out. 10, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, My Buddy Valentine, Loveless, like even the Low End Theory, A Tribe Called Quest, Soundgarden, Bad Motorfinger. Like, I mean, so you can see where the industry was going. We all know what happened there. Grunge took over. And so it's just like, Skid Row come in like, we're doubling down on hair metal. It's going to go this way for sure. And then the entire industry and world was like, you're a little late now. Maybe you should have zagged instead of zigged there. So, I mean, I don't know about the rest of you, but that's what I think this album suffers from. It was 5 years too late, or a few years too late anyway. But I mean, there was so much great, fantastic music in 1991. So I can see why I mentioned I had moved from Prince Edward Island to Alberta, and I just never really heard of it. And even though I like Sebastian's singing, I wrote here, I'm like, that whole album and all the singing could have used 50% less. Like, I don't know. Yeah, exactly. It's just like, okay, man, I get that's a rock thing, but it's just like, yeah, it's just like when rappers are like, 1, 2, 1, 2, it's just like, okay, you could have probably done that a little less. Like, just stick to some lyrics and things like that. Yeah, I mean, heavier, great. One thing I thought was cool is apparently before this album, they were influenced. One of the biggest influence on was a band I really liked was Pantera. They had actually toured with Pantera, and loved their like energy and how hard it was. So I guess they were somewhat trying to emulate it. Now, I don't know if they really pulled off Pantera level hard, but I mean, they did their best. They did their best. But I mean, it's a good hair metal album. I'm going to say it's an okay hair metal album, from my opinion. Again, I just feel it was a bit too late. Sebastian Bach had his issues too that caused rifts in the band. I mean, he had some anger issues. Somebody threw a ball at him once and he just turned around and threw it back, but nailed a little girl in the face instead of who threw it. He wore a total like homophobic t-shirt that was kind of a play on Raid, the thing, but it was about AIDS and homophobic. Apparently they even asked Nirvana, who was the new band starting out, to tour with them and open, but Nirvana, let's just say woke before their time. We're like, yeah, dude, we're not really that misogynistic, hot girls and sexy cars, 80s hair metal anymore. We're a little more than that, and we don't like your views, and they declined. So, I mean, I think Sebastian Bach, in his defense, basically was a teenager when he left home to join bands. And I think, was raised in crazy hair metal 80s and, didn't know any better. He's since actually apologized and come around for all that. But I mean, there was a lot of controversy about that. And obviously the band broke up shortly after that. But to me, I just thought this album just meandered a little too much. I think it's good hair metal. The guitar playing I thought was just very derivative of other 80s bands at the time. I didn't really think they pushed their, I guess, musicianship that far. It was, maybe they played a little harder, but it wasn't really better music to me. I know it's one of their most loved albums, but to me, I just think it was a bit too little, too late. And they just, it just didn't carry through into that time. And they're going to suffer from that a little bit. That's my start. I'll come back when we get into our scores a bit. But Scott Coates over in the Kingdom of Thailand over there, I guess, what are your thoughts on this 80s, or I guess not even 80s, 90s hair metal?
Yeah, it's funny you say 90s because I do think of it as 80s. I think I saw them open for AC/DC or maybe Aerosmith. And I remember you said the homophobic things. I remember he screamed at some guy or some called him a fucking faggot, like suck my cock and stuff at that concert. I definitely loved the glam metal, and I had those shirts with the 3/4 length sleeves. Like I had a Motley Crue, a Rat, a Def Leppard, Poison, and Twisted Sister one. So I was really into it. And off their first album, like 18 and Life, I'll Remember You, Youth Gone Wild, like those are solid tracks and still stand up. So I'll kind of work through a few songs. Monkey Business, his shriek at 38 seconds is I mean, a siren of what's to come, right? And to me, it's just kind of what you get for the rest of the album is he's regarded as having one of the great heavy metal voices. And I would say he does, but it just kind of goes on a bit too much. And that, I don't know what the term is for the 80s, 90s guitar that's overmixed, but that kicks you right at the start. And then Slave to the Grind means standard riff to me.
That's called Too Much Cocaine, I think, Scott.
Oh, Too Much Cocaine. Okay. They could have had a song called Too Much Cocaine. Slave to the Grind. I mean, the lyrics are juvenile and it kind of goes from there. The Threat. I thought this sounds just like Youth Gone Wild, but not quite as good or catchy, but it's very, very similar. Quicksand Jesus. I don't know. It tried to fulfill that late 80s hard rock album formula by plunking in a ballad there, on track 4. But again, to me, there's nothing new or standout. Psycho Love and Get the Fuck Out. I don't know. Just more shrieking, lame riffs and such. Living on a Chain Gang. This is kind of where I get almost done with this thing. It becomes kind of annoying and kind of musical abuse. Stop Meeting the Riot Act while my brain is still intact. And the guitar solo, wow. And his shrieking is over the top. Final song, I think, for me, is the perfect name, Wasted Time. I mean, boy, I honestly feel like I've wasted a couple hours of my life that I'm never going to get back and didn't get any value from. And Scott Gregory, please don't take this personal, because I love that we choose albums from the musical spectrum. But I mean, I got to really say, I got no musical enjoyment from this. Nothing new. Um, again, he is credited for that great voice, but he just seemed to shriek, shriek, shriek. And those guitar solos were monotonous. Yeah, and it's just juvenile. I mean, I think if you listen closely, you can really hear glam metal dying in this album. Like, it is the death rattle sound of it. To me, there's good reason. I bought their first album, and I have no idea remembering this coming out. And I think there's a good reason, because I'm shocked that it had five singles on it. I'm really sorry, but this just irritated me. I didn't like it, and I listen to this kind of music, but there's just little redeeming or good I can say about this. And again, I think I'd be curious of other around 1991 glam metal albums that stank, but I think this is the true death rattle of glam metal. So sorry to be so negative. And I listened to it again right before this, while doing some exercise, and I just wanted to find something better in it, but I just can't. I think it's fucking terrible. Over to you, Alan.
The death rattle of glam metal. Thanks, Scott. That's funny. Yeah, dudes, I think I'm actually very much on the same page with you as far as observations go. And just a forewarning, I don't know what the difference between glam rock and hair metal is, so I'll probably use those words interchangeably. Everyone knows what I'm talking about with the teased hair and the leotards and the guy liner. Just as a background, I had never actually listened to Skid Row prior to this. The only song I've ever heard is 18 in Life, so not a single song on Slave to the Grind sounded familiar to me. And so I put it on, started listening to it, and thought, okay, yeah, it's hair metal. Sonically, this is firmly locked into that sweet mid to late 80s hair metal, glam rock, Sunset Boulevard sound that's reminiscent of contemporaries like Motley Crue and Guns N' Roses. And then I looked up the Wikipedia, and I noticed that this album was released in 1991. And just like you guys, I immediately jumped to oh shit, you know what else was released in 1991? Pearl Jam. Yep. 10, which was released in August. Nirvana's Nevermind was released in September. Soundgarden, Bad Motorfinger, released in October of 1991. And Slave to the Grind was released in June. And it made me wonder, would they even have bothered to release this album if those other guys had come out first? They were only a few months out from, to Scott's point, the death rattle of this style of music, the relentless wave of grunge, alternative, college rock, whatever you want to call it, that dominated the 90s. And yeah, I mean, instantly, Slave to the Grind sounded old. It sounded like it was from a different era. So, I don't know. Yeah, like Darren mentioned, it kind of sounded like they maybe doubled down on this style of music, but I'm sure the writing had to have been on the wall. Even, the guys in the production studios probably would have been like, "Are you guys sure? Because have you heard these other bands?" I don't know. I'm just spitballing here.
Hey, Nirvana, you want to open for us?
No, but our friend Soundgarden will go on the road with you. They actually did.
Well, there you go. Oh, sorry, just lost my place in my notes here. Yeah, I mean, the album did go 2 times platinum, so this might just be our own biases creeping in. I mean, obviously, there still would have been a pretty large fan base who probably thought at the time that all of these, grunge bands were totally whack. That's entirely possible. So I was too young to really recall any of that, but I'm sure those were conversations that would have been had definitely if social media was a thing back then. But anyway, back to Slave to the Grind. I think for what it is, sonically, it's excellent. It sounds just like anything else I would expect from other bands of that era and of that genre. The guitars sound great. The drums sound great. Sebastian Bach's vocal delivery is incredible. You know, as Darren mentioned, he was a singer from an early age, so there's really no denying his talent. Just maybe his stylistic approach might not be for you, whatever. Your mileage may vary. But I think, like, together, sonically, it's really cohesive. It's exactly the sound you would expect from a glam rock band that's selling out stadiums. Lyrically, I think there was a good mix of complexity. You know, they were covering topics such as organized religion and critiquing the modern ways of life. And there were also the more lighthearted party rock jams, you know, songs about drugs and chicks and shit. And I found myself actually favoring the ballads from this album. And that's atypical of me. Like, usually slow songs just suck the life out of me and make me sad. But power ballads just hit different from metal bands, you know? Just a preference thing. So for me, the standout track, I think the one I kept going back to was Quicksand Jesus. I just think it's a really nice, good sounding song. I don't know. In a Darkened Room, also really enjoyed going back to that one. Like, the guitar tones are really juicy. It's got a really catchy chorus, so it ended up getting stuck in my head. And then a song called The Threat, which was the third track on the album. I found that to be pretty fun. The rest, I could kind of take it or leave it, and more likely leave it. Yeah, I don't know. Just like the thrashy sort of speed metal thing, not really my personal preference. So those ones did not resonate with me whatsoever, despite, you know, the aforementioned talent in the process of creating that music. Yeah, Darren, you raised a good point. You can kind of hear that they're really trying to progress the medium of hair metal, maybe in a different direction than what it was. Like, they tried to go with a more heavier sound. But yeah, I just think it probably got derailed from the rise of grunge and alternative rock. Like, in a parallel universe somewhere where grunge never took off, I kind of find myself wondering what the sonic landscape of rock and metal might have looked like, you know, in the late 90s. So yeah, I don't know. That's something we'll never have an answer to. But I just keep going back to the death rattle of hair metal. So yeah. And I also had in my notes here that Sebastian Bach's dad had painted the cover art. Darren, you touched on that. If you are listening and you haven't seen the album cover, it's kind of like a medieval inspired painted aesthetic, but it features people using modern technologies like telephones and stuff, and I think JFK makes a cameo in there, so they're probably trying to say something, but I don't know, maybe it's over my head. Anyway, I'll throw it over to you, Scott G.
Yeah, thanks. So even though I said I didn't listen to a lot of glam and hair metal, there's a lot of crossover with hard rock on this album, which I did consume a lot during my teenage listening years. I was like 16 when this came out. And I think back to bands like Guns N' Roses, Soundgarden, who Skid Row toured with, I said, Alice in Chains, AC/DC, Metallica. And we were talking about albums that were released in that time frame. 92 was Stone Temple Pilots' debut album, Core, which I think shares a lot more in common with this album than it does with the the Nirvanas of the world. Their first album was extremely heavy compared to like Purple and some of their later releases as well too. So I think as hard as we are on them being, these heavy rock kind of glam holdovers trying to hang on, I think there was still an opportunity for bands to still make some money and get some hits, right? Like you had mentioned that the album itself did quite well. There were no real super standout tracks from a charts perspective for the singles. None of them broke the top 10, which is weird because the album itself, as you said, went double platinum, was number 1 in the US and top 5 to 10 in pretty much every other market. It finished as the number 54 album on the Billboard Top 200 that year. So it's still, with all those other monsters releasing, actually did pretty well. And that's pretty interesting to me, right? Because here our core mission is looking at albums instead of individual singles. And it boggles me that like it would be unheard of today to have like no singles chart or catch any wind and then have the album actually go double platinum and top the chart. So don't ask me how they did that. I think it's, as you said, there's a loyal holdover fan base of like hair metal people that just still needed something to listen to. And you can only listen to so much Bon Jovi, I guess. I found it interesting that there was an explicit version of this album that had Get the Fuck Out, and then Beggar's Day was on the clean one. And so I tried to listen to both. And I'm like, if I had to pick one, which would I choose? And I choose Get the Fuck Out because I think it's a really funny song. It's got my favorite lyrics on the album. You're standing too close. What's the fuck with you? You ain't my old lady and you ain't a tattoo. Well, no need to whimper and no need to shout. This party's over, so get the fuck out. I mean, as far as like glammy lyrics and that go, it's not high level Queen, but I think it's pretty good for the rocking side of things. I did like Beggar's Day because of the really catchy chorus on it though. But it didn't have a lot of beat to it. Other than that, it was just your typical metal song in many respects. And I think that's really something that you could say about pretty much all of this album, right? Like some of the singles we talked about, Monkey Business, and Scott, you're right. Those opening vocals are pretty epic. They set the tone for the album for better or worse. I like the tempo of it. It has that hair metal feel coming through for, a little fan servicing for the bass, I guess. And I don't mind it. The harmonies are rocking. The guitar work is journeyman, as you guys have said before, but it's solid. I would actually throw Monkey Business on like a 90s hard or a hard rock playlist, for sure. The title track, I always hold title tracks to a higher standard. I don't know if that's fair, but like you named the album after it. You must have thought something of it, right? Like you want it in people's mind. It's like an anti-corporatism, typical rock, don't put a leash on me, bro, kind of thing. It's a little witty with that. You can't be king of the world if you're a slave to the grind. And like rat racial slime. I can't even say it's like a tongue twister. It's cute. But what I noticed when I was listening to this one is those guitar solos on any of the tracks, and this one in particular, they're just not long. And I think of like Guns N' Roses and Slash and stuff like that. And he'll go on for like 20, 30 seconds. Van Halen, like he'll just riff it out. And here it's just like obligatory guitar solo. In like 5 seconds, it's like gone. I'm like, what's going on?
Maybe that was part of their progressive approach to music. Because you kind of saw the end of those long, drawn-out guitar solos.
Yeah, but this is a holdover, right? So I get it, right? And I think you're right, but I liked that. Like, I didn't want that to go.
I think that would have made
it like
better.
Show me your chops if you got them kind of thing. So it's, I think, a reason why Guns N' Roses could, still do some Use Your Illusion into the 90s and stuff like that is because you just did have such a talented, dominant guitar player putting it out there. But here it just felt like it was a checkbox on some sort of compulsory formula that they were following. You guys mentioned the ballads. I did like In a Darkened Room. It's that formulaic. It's a typical rock ballad with like the weeping guitar kind of feeling to it. And maybe I'm desensitized to it now, but I don't have any nostalgia for the song that's propping it up. And maybe I'm just too sober too often to really get into like a really weepy ballad now. As far as Spotify is concerned, though, this is the most played song on the album. So like, what do I know? People still like it, but I don't know. Placed in context, I'm sure it's a very lovely song at the time. Guitar works lovely. I just can't get behind the lyrics. The vocals are fine, but I think he's underused compared to some of the other songs on the album. Maybe I just can't relate to the concept of a darkened room in general because my kid has nightlights everywhere, and maybe someone younger and angstier would get something out of it that I'm not. I think Wasted Time holds up better between the two or three ballads that are on here. I like the tempo better. It's more rolling sound to the guitars and the vocals in comparison. I'd be far more likely to throw Wasted Time on between Jesus and A Darkened Room. So I think the hidden gems on this album for me, or at least one, was Living on a Chain Gang. I don't know why, but I like the little bit of political and social commentary in the lyrics. It's got that big hard rock guitar sound to it, some snappy drums. Sebastian Bach is like in full wail on it. And overall, I enjoy the track. The guitar solo needed to be longer because I actually enjoyed it, but I don't know why. I went into this album expecting solos like Dave Snake Sabo. He was just never on my radar as anyone that's like a top guitar player, but the little sniff I get of it on these albums is good. There's lots of good solos on this album. I actually liked Creepshow had a little bit of a bassy solo on it as well too. So, Primus would probably like that one. I don't know. Fun stuff. But to me, this is still my sister's music. I can't fully get into it. It's trapped somewhere between glam metal, that I can listen to with a touch of nostalgia, like ironically belting out Cherry Pie or something like that. But, I was so into GNR, STP, Metallica, Alice in Chains. And as an opportunity cost, I would just rather listen to all of those from the 90s than this. I'm glad I did listen to it, though. Scott C is a bit more down on it than I am. I'm just like, probably not going back to this. But I didn't think it was anything really special either. I'm glad I listened to it though, because I did have a lot of curiosity about them, especially, bands that release and then find their own voice a little later on. And I do feel like I got a more honest listen to what Skid Row was over the length of their career, as opposed to just listening to the more glammy debut album that I had. But yeah, I don't think I'll be visiting Skid Row again anytime soon. With that in mind, Darren, final thoughts and scores?
Yeah, really the final thoughts are, there's talent there. I actually really do like Sebastian Bach. I think it's saying, but this is too little too late. But if you're my age and you're in your 50s and you were there in the 80s, and I'm a big music nerd. I push myself. I listen to new stuff and I've grown that way. But as we know, most people just kind of live in the era they were born in. So people my age that were into the hair metal probably love this album. And if you do like that genre, it's probably worth a listen. But, I go back and I think, if you're going to spend the time to go back and listen to glam hair metal, I would at minimum recommend their first album way before this. Or how about Motley Crue, Shout at the Devil, Van Halen, 1984, Rat Out of the Cellar, Ozzy's Bark at the Moon, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest. Good Lord. There's so many, let's just say other options that probably represent that genre a bit better. And they were just in it a bit earlier as well. Anyway, that being said, I recommend, I'm going to give it a 2 there because I think, there is some talent in there. His singing is really good. Influence, I'm also coming in at a 2. I think it's a little too late, even though it's a good album. And I'm going to actually come at a 2.5 overall, just because I actually really like Sebastian Bach. So 0.5 for him, even though I'm obviously not into his troubled past, but we were all stupid when we were like, he was like barely out of his teens when these albums came out. He was very young, made some mistakes, but has since apologized. But if you watch some of the stuff or follow him on social, he's actually quite funny. Funny dude. So that's it for me, but pretty much 2.5. All right. Scott Coates.
Yeah, good summary, Darren. And again, Scott, I appreciate what you picked here. I've thought about this quite a bit, and sorry, influence, I got to give it a 1 because it's not going to inspire me to listen to any more Skid Row, any more music of that genre. It didn't inspire me at the time, although I listened to and saw in concert, bands like Bon Jovi and Poison and etc. I loved that music, but this one, and again, I mentioned I owned their first album, did nothing. Recommend. So influence, I give it a 1. Recommend, I also have to give it a 1 because I just think there's so many other glam metal, hair metal bands around that area that I could literally name easily 10 other albums that I think are just way better or represent the time period better. And in fact, I'd recommend Skid Row's first album for that matter, but not this one. And overall, I'm giving it a 1. I really think it's a shit album, and it is the death rattle of glam metal. It sucks.
That's going to be the
I'm
title.
sorry. So over to Alan.
The entry for this month.
1s across the board.
The death rattle of glam metal. Yeah, I mean, overall, I think it was an okay listen. I didn't find myself gravitating back to it after a full run through of tracks, but I also didn't hate my time spent with it. And maybe it was you, Scott Gregory, who mentioned the nostalgia factor. There was no nostalgia factor for me. So if I do put this on again, which is unlikely, it'll probably be mood dependent. But that being said, I'm glad I listened to it because I got more exposure from the band, and there's nothing from this album that I think I would add to any of my playlists. That's usually a benchmark for a good Sonic Collective experience for me. Is I'll find a gem on an album that we reviewed and throw it on for later enjoyment, but nothing on this one. However, I did keep going back to listen to 18 in Life because that is a banger, and I think it still counts as 80s music, so I threw it in my 80s.
Can I ask you something though?
Anyway,
you do like karaoke. How have you never heard I Remember You? Like the original or someone singing it? Like I do not believe that.
Actually, I could picture you singing that.
Yeah.
You got a dynamite voice.
Well,
yeah. Let's all get together next time Scott Coates in town, and Alan's got to sing I Remember You.
Okay, I've got that song queued up, and I will play it as soon as we're done this. Because I may very well
guaranteed
know it.
that song.
Yeah. Let's get into numbers real quick. So influenced, I'm actually going to go higher. I'm going to go with a 3 out of 5 because I want to see if they changed up their sound for their 1995 release, Subhuman Race. Because Slave to the Grind came out at such a weird sort of transitory time in music history, I find myself kind of thinking back to, I think, Scott, your last pick, which was Slang, Def Leppard's 1996 release, which sounded, for me, like that was an album I really enjoyed. So I wonder if Skid Row did the same thing as Def Leppard just the year prior, changing up their sound. So this has influenced me to go and explore that. 3 out of 5. Recommend, I can only give it a 2 out of 5 because, like you other guys said, there's a lot more albums from 1991 or even the late 80s that are worth putting on before this one. Time is a precious commodity. Don't spend it on Slave to the Grind. You might as well just check out their first album. And lastly, overall, I'm giving it a 2.5 out of 5. I think that's a pretty fair kind of midway score to give it. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. There were things I really liked about it. There were things that kind of did not move the needle one bit for me. So 2.5 is where I land.
Nice. I love that your influence is propped up by it can't stay this bad. They must have made better decisions later on. That really tickles me. Yeah. So for me, I mean, I'm glad I dabbled into it. You know, I was really interested. You guys really hit a lot on that whole 90s intersection of all these different styles of music and tastes changing and bands coming to grips with either, you know, what they are doing, taking ascendancy, or again, you know, the twilight of certain styles as well too. So for me, influence is a one. I don't really have a huge amount. I did go and listen to a sprinkle of some of the later stuff as well too, just for kind of the same thing that you said, Alan, but I feel like totally satisfied in that category at this point. I still have recommend at a 3 though, because I think I totally agree there is way more better music that you should probably be focusing on long term, plus or minus 5 years to either side of this thing. But I do think it is an interesting historical piece, one for this band in particular, but then also in this transitory period of music. So I think this is the contingent on, you know, I had listened to their first album multiple times. So I had that comparison piece, and I think that's important. So you have to listen to that one. Like everyone else said, it is, I think, a better album, more polished, and more true to what it is. But then listen to this one and see that, you know, band transitioning, and then maybe do what Alan said and just listen to the next one and see if they just keep moving on. So 3 for recommend. Overall, a 2 for me, though. I think we're all floating at like between 1 and like 2.5. So it's a bit of a dud album wise, even though it was number 1 in the country, double platinum. The old white guys do not approve 30 years later. 9. Yeah. Das ist not ein good album.
Dude, I just noticed they released an album in 2022.
Oh yeah, they're still going strong.
Oh yeah, they're still going, man.
They're still going.
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah.
I guess my homework doesn't just stop
No,
in
man.
1995.
They're going to be rolling those guys out like the Rolling Stones and like Iron Lungs and stuff like that. They ain't stopping.
Awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, good. Yeah, good pick. It's like, you know, you don't know what you don't know until you listen to it, and none of us had really heard this album, so that was interesting.
Totally right.
But yeah, I mean, now, as we mentioned, so in previous iterations of the Sonic Collective, we've made a special episode just to announce the next episode, but we're not doing that anymore. If you've traditionally listened to this, usually you would wait for another episode, but now we're just tacking it on to the end of this one. So I think now's a good time to jump to the next episode. So I usually start the rounds, but we've been talking amongst ourselves and looking how we can improve, and we're looking at different things. But we came up with a few concepts for albums, but one that we thought of was compilations, and it's something we never really did before. We had a couple of special episodes where I think some compilation type albums came into play, but this time I thought, well, why the hell not? And I think I was kind of almost inspired by this round when we started out with some older albums, and I picked Elvis that I remember from a kid. But another thing being a kid was, especially for me, late 70s, early 80s we're going into here, is soundtracks and compilations were huge. Like for me, there wasn't even mixed tapes. Like unless you had like a big kick-ass multi-component stereo system with a cassette deck and a turntable and everything, you couldn't even like make a mixtape. So you were really you were listening to these K-Tel compilations, or later on you got, you know, your Much Music, Big Shiny Tunes and stuff, and who knows, one of you guys may pick one of those because they're great compilations. But for me, I'm kind of going back to my youth, and I think too, I like my eclectic style. I've always kind of liked all different genres of music, which may be why I was drawn to these compilations. So there's lots of great soundtracks. I had trouble with this a bit, but I went back to my youth. But Pretty in Pink, the soundtrack was up there for me. The Great Outdoors, if you remember that Dan Aykroyd, John Candy movie, that was close for me. And then there's one compilation from 1980 called Sound Waves by K-Tel. That was close for me, but I actually landed on the compilation also released by K-Tel the next year called Today's Top Sounds Moving Full Tilt. Full tilt. So I mean, this is like 16 songs. It was released in 1981. And I remember buying this and just playing the shit out of it. But as a kid from Prince Edward Island, Canada, I mean, you don't get new music, you don't get access to it. Like, I mean, Turning Japanese by the Vapors is on there. Drugs in My Pocket by the Monks. I mean, but also like Too Hot, Cool in the Gang. Like, it's just all over the place. I mean, Lucky Me, Anne Murray is on there.
Anne Murray.
Carrie by Cliff Richard. I mean, there's so much. Atomic by Blondie. But like there's some cool stuff. There's probably some stuff that's not so cool that I didn't love as much, but that's just what it was back then. And obviously, you also had to have the Canadian content going too. So I don't know. This probably will not be on just some Spotify playlist. So similar to what Alan did recently with the Beach Boys kind of best of, I am going to do with this. So I will create a Spotify playlist. If you go to thesoniccollective.com, I will have a link there, or search for Full Tilt on Spotify, and you should be able to find it. But again, go to thesoniccollective.com if not sure, and the link will be there. But we're going to listen to all the songs on this album for a month, and then the other members will start choosing next month. They'll choose their favorite soundtrack or compilation album, and we're going to have a good time and just reminisce about what happened before you just had all these Spotify and Apple Music playlists served to you. Well, you had to go buy an album. Yeah. With that, I'll send it back to you, Scott.
Sweet. Well, I'm super excited for that. I'm from the same generation where, again, you were blessed if you had a double tape deck and you could actually build your own. But I was in the same boat where I would get like Solid Gold Volume 5 from the gas station when Dad filled up, and then that's what you listened into the car, right? So excited for this round as well too. I hope everyone out there is as well. Thank you again for joining us today. We appreciate every listen that you give us. Would love to hear from you as well too. Find us on the socials, and otherwise we will see you next month. Take care.
Hey, thanks for joining us on the Sonic Collective, where we've explored the music, the history, and the impact of some of the greatest albums of all time. We hope you've enjoyed our discussions and gained new insights and appreciation for the music you and we love. Join us next month for another exciting album, and until then, keep listening to great music.